So let me bring in our next guest, the economist, Dr. Rebecca Homkes. Great to have you on, Rebecca, because this comes as a day where we knew eventually there would be a decision from the Supreme Court. We just didn't know when. And then today was the day we get it.
Likely come relatively soon as they just had their winter break. So many of us were bracing for today. But we did get the decision that many expected today. Maybe some of the wording in the verdict was a bit different. Maybe the exact vote was a bit different. But I'd say roughly as the market and most folks who have been watching this topic did expect over the past couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we heard when the arguments were happening, and we just could hear the audio, it seemed like the justices were favoring this decision here. Ultimately, in this 6-3 ruling, what does this mean ultimately for the Trump administration going forward, really for the next couple of years?
Well, it's certainly a very explicit verdict. So, as you mentioned, most who were part of the oral arguments or who heard them did anticipate the ruling that we got today. The court did not address the wider issue of whether or not the legislative branch or Congress can give this authority to the executive branch. What they explicitly ruled on was that the IEEPA Act that the Trump administration was using did not grant the administration power to issue tariffs in this way. So, it was in some ways a more narrow ruling than we might have expected, but it was very explicit and left very little room for interpretation that the tariffs that we have enacted under this were not something that the administration had the authority to do. That doesn't mean they don't have other recourses. We already heard from the president this morning, as we are anticipating. We've been knowing from the administration for months. They did have other statutes ready to go. But IEEPA was certainly the most broad, the most sweeping, and the fastest. And that's likely why the administration started with this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what a wide range. If you think about it, we're almost a year, well, not a couple of months away from April. And April 2025 was a roller coaster when President Trump really announced this. And we saw what IEEPA was starting out from the moment there where everything just dropped in the market because there was so much uncertainty going forward. But now that we look at tariffs in general, even as the president was speaking today in this 45-minute news conference, it didn't seem like the market was backing down now from tariffs.
We're seeing a relatively muted response from the market, and that is to be anticipated because the ruling wasn't a surprise. Again, this was very much already factored in. And any other statute or executive order that the administration chooses to use is much slower, often involves an investigation or a ruling, or is time limited. The market reaction previous April was very much due to the chaotic nature of the news and the uncertainty. Markets hate bad news, but they really hate uncertainty more. And a little bit of what we're seeing is the feeling that we'll have a little bit more pace and a little bit more expectation. Certainty, no executive is thinking this afternoon they have more certainty going forward. But one big area of uncertainty that you can wake up in the morning and have another set of tariffs issued against you, some of that has abated. And we're seeing a little bit of that come in the market reaction.
I thought it was so interesting too when the president was speaking, and really he just described what I think a lot of people were thinking when he said, it's probably going to be caught up in the court system for the next 5 years.
Mhm. It will be years, and there's a couple different aspects. Again, I would see this ruling as, again, I'm an economist, not a legal issue, but from what I'm speaking to my colleagues, this was relatively explicit that the IEEPA Act does not grant this authority, but there are other statutes, about 5 main ones they will look to. So we should expect it to be in the courts. Also, we didn't have any explanation of if rebates need to be issued or how they would be issued. So that aspect alone, we're talking billions of dollars, that will also get caught up in the courts for the next couple of years. There is nothing straightforward about how these could possibly be issued.
Yeah, the perfect segue here, Doctor, because I just brought up this post here from Fox News colleague Aisha Hasni, and really talking about these refunds that could be up to $175 billion. Penn Warden budget model projects that, saying that we project that reversing the IEEPA tariffs will generate up to $175 billion in refunds unless replaced by another source. Future tariff revenue collections will fall by half. So, I mean, how do they even work out refunds that have already been collected on and probably spent somewhere else?
We are in uncharted territory. So it's also important to note that refunds, if they do happen, how they happen, are only on the tariffs related to IEEPA. So all other tariffs are still in place and no refunds are in question there. So it is a segment of the tariff revenue collected next year. Now, when you pay a tariff to at customs, it is recorded. It's not like this is happening cash piles at the border. Like we do have a record of who paid these. Now, a lot of companies have already issued essentially warrants. So there is actually a secondary market for those who said, "Hey, I'll give you 500,000 now. You might have 3 million in rebates coming to you, but you won't have to deal with it. I'll just take it." So we do have a healthy secondary market as well. Now, again, the Supreme Court decided not to weigh in on how rebate should happen, which was not expected. Sorry, which was expected. That will now happen in a more International Trade Court, which already has thousands of petitions to it. This is nothing that we'll have clarity on in the next couple of weeks, probably not the next couple of months. So expect this to draw up for months, if not years. It'll be well past the current Trump administration before we have clarity of how these refunds have actually been fully issued. So no company should expect a check to come in the next couple of months. No consumer should expect all their prices to drop in the next couple of weeks. This will be a very long, drawn out process.
And lastly, does this now decision that it's finally out there by the Supreme Court, does it ease the markets? I feel like this was always hanging over, when's it going to happen? When's it going to drop? Now, can the market just fluctuate, given, let's just hope that nothing happens over the weekend with Middle East tensions. But given away from that, does this ease maybe the uncertainty in the market right now?
Well, it does nothing, as you mentioned, Mike, to touch the geopolitical uncertainty, which we are also speaking about today. It doesn't address all the economic uncertainty. We had a very poor Q4 GDP read come out, which has been buried in all this news. So in some ways, the administration did get a bit of a favor from the ruling happening today. It does ease the very specific economic uncertainty of not being able to plan supply chains, negotiate with trading partners, and anticipate your pricing a bit more. Any other tariffs that happen will have to be limited by industry or by trading partner, and again, often with an investigation. So it does take away, which was a very big overhang of executives last year, is again, any week this could change. And it was been very difficult to deal with that uncertainty on a day-to-day basis. That has, for some part, been taken away, because this ruling was quite explicit that broad, sweeping tariffs on any country, any industry at any time were not in the remit of the executive branch.
Yeah, it's going to be really fascinating to see just how everything moves forward here. But Dr. Rebecca Homkes, thanks so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox, giving us a great breakdown of what happened today and maybe what to expect a little bit later on. We always appreciate it.
My pleasure, Mike. Have a good one.
You too. Take care.